We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
The Pigskin Tales Podcast is all about the lesser-known pro football players. Yes, there are stories about the ones we know, like Fran Tarkenton and Red Grange. But have you ever heard of Ernie Nevers? How about Dave Osborne or even Grady Alderman? These men created their own path to the NFL. How did they do it? Listen to the Pigskin Tales Podcast, now streaming on your favorite music platform to get podcasts. For those that are new to listening to the Pigskin Tales Podcast, thanks for choosing to listen. I appreciate the fact that you took the time out of your busy day to find out what this podcast is all about. Before I really get into it, I want to take some time to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ross, and I grew up in a small farming community 25 miles south of Fargo, North Dakota. Colfax is one of the closest high schools that I attended. Technically, it's in the Richland School District, and it's comprised of Colfax, Abercrombie, Christine, Galchutt, and Barney. I am part of a family of 3 boys and no sisters. But now that my 2 brothers and I have been married for a while, I can say that I have 2 sisters and a wife. My wife and I don't have any kids of our own, but we fostered kids within Grand Forks County, and since that didn't work out to adopt, we have now been looking into adopting from the Village. The Village is a small company that helps people in many different ways, like financial counseling, adopting children, and just counseling in general. Anyway, my older brother, lives with his wife and 2 boys in Minneapolis, and my younger brother lives in Waconia with his wife and 5 boys. My younger brother just turned 40 on the 8th, and so now we're all officially in the 40 and older club. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. Maybe we'll just say that we're all a little older and wiser. Okay, so now that I've told you a little bit about me and my family, I want to tell you about this podcast. First, the easiest and simplest way of explaining what it is a collection of stories that I have found on ex-NFL players that came from Minnesota. That's what it has evolved into. At first, I just started out analyzing Minnesota Vikings players, news, and games that I watched. Then I decided to research the history of the Vikings and try to put it into a biography of sorts. I was attempting to do my own version of ESPN's 30 for 30, but that didn't work out. So really, I just wrote the player's biography from the internet. I know I'm not supposed to use Wikipedia, but I used it for some of the research links. And at the end of an episode, I used to say all the links I used, but then I decided to shorten things up. So now what I've been doing is sort of the same thing as before, writing a biography about a player, but now I do it in a short series if I can. Some series have gotten really long, like Ernie Nevers, but I've been trying to limit myself to only 4 parts so that it doesn't get so long. If you've listened to this podcast in the past and have enjoyed it, please review my work. I have an email address you can send a message to, or you can find my profile on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I have attempted to create a YouTube account, but haven't used that as of late because my computer doesn't seem to want to save my video work. Which is not an excuse, I just haven't been able to get to it. So what I'm working on now is saving money to buy a new computer. Anyway, if you want to send me an email to my address, it's pigskintalespodcast@gmail.com. I also have a Patreon account in which you can support me monetarily. There are membership levels so low that it only costs you $1 to support me if you so choose. I'm also part of the Sports History Network, ran by Arnie Chapman, who doubles as host of the podcast, The Football History Dude. His stuff is pretty good too. You should take a listen. He just made his 200th episode. So there you have it, a little bit about the Pigskin Tales podcast. I hope you enjoy listening to this, and I hope that you decide to listen to more episodes moving forward. Thanks for listening to the Pigskin Tales podcast. This story was written and produced by Ross Bliley, edited by Nikki Bliley. To support the podcast, join me on Patreon. You can find the podcast on any platform you want: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Audible. If you like the story, help me out by doing a quick review. This will help others to want to listen. The soundtrack is from filmmusic.io. Once again, thanks for listening to the Pigskin Tales podcast.
I put up my replica 1909 World Series program poster from Row 1 brand, and that's all it took for Marla to do a complete redesign of the Guardian offices, doing up the walls with tremendous prints from baseball, football, basketball, hockey, and more sports events. And every one of them can't help but trigger memories of sports yesteryear.
And here's the last one. Let's put it up here by your desk. Perfect.
Ah, that's a nice one. College football 1923, Navy versus Penn State. Do you remember that game, Marla?
I sure do. It was October 20th, 1923. Cloudy, but a reasonable 57 degrees at the 2:30 kickoff time. Over 20,000 turned out at Beaver Field in College Station, Pennsylvania for this clash of two of the nation's top teams. The Nittany Lions were the underdogs, despite having won their first 3 games by a combined score of 94-0. The heavy favorites were the Midshipmen, who went on to play in the Rose Bowl after the season.
Right, and the game immediately became...
The entire color of the game would ultimately be dominated by Penn State's star halfback Harry Wilson, but both offenses took some time to get going for a good 22 minutes before Wilson got the crowd to their feet with an interception of Bill McKee's forward pass, returning it all the way for his first touchdown of the day.
Wilson certainly was great.
On the next kickoff, who would end up as returner but Harry Wilson? Wilson dodged at least a half dozen.
Recall the greatest moments in sports history, or just your own personal favorites, with Row 1 brand sports paraphernalia. Don't delay. Visit today at sportshistorynetwork.com/Row1. That's ROW1 today for access to the full Row 1 catalog of gallery prints and gifts like t-shirts, long-sleeve shirts, telephone cases, coffee mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Act today for a 15% discount off all prints with coupon code SHN15 and 20% off all other items with coupon code SHN20 at checkout. And keep your dial locked to the Sports History Network for the exciting chronicles of the 1920 sports world in Orville, Mulligan. Sports Strike, coming soon.
The score remained Penn State 14, Navy 0. The second half had barely begun when Harry Wilson and Penn State went on to work on Navy again.